In the year 490 BC, the city of Athens stood as a beacon of democracy in a world dominated by kings and tyrants. Its people were free, its warriors proud, its thinkers ambitious. In the agora, merchants haggled, philosophers debated, and citizens reveled in their independence. But across the sea, in the vast Persian Empire, a storm was brewing. A storm that threatened to wipe Athens from existence. For years, the great Persian king, Darius I, had expanded his empire, bringing countless lands under his rule. But there was one act of defiance that he would never forgive. Years earlier, the Athenians had dared to send aid to the rebellious Ionian Greeks who sought to break free from Persian control. Though the rebellion was ultimately crushed, the Athenian involvement was an insult, and an insult to the great king could only be answered with war. Darius had made a vow he would not rest until Athens was destroyed. And so, in the summer of 490 BC, he sent his mightiest generals, Datis and Artaphernes, with an armada of warships to bring Greece to its knees. Their destination? The plains of Marathon, just 25 miles from the Athenian heartland. The Persian fleet approached the Greek coastline like a thunderous storm. Hundreds of ships, each filled with elite warriors, rode with terrifying precision. When they landed at Marathon, the earth trembled beneath their numbers. The Persian army, perhaps 30,000 strong, assembled in perfect formation, an immense and merciless force. When the Athenians learned of the invasion, fear spread like wildfire. This was no ordinary battle. This was the survival of their city, their freedom, their very way of life. The Persian Empire had crushed nations far greater than Athens. How could a single city, barely 10,000 hoplites and 1,000 Plataean allies, stand against the most powerful army the world had ever seen? But even in the face of impossible odds, there were those who refused to bow. Among them stood Miltiades, an Athenian general with experience, wisdom, and a daring plan. Miltiades knew the Persians. He had studied their tactics, their weaknesses. He saw that the open plains of Marathon would be the battlefield, but rather than cower behind Athens' walls, he persuaded the Athenian assembly to march out and meet the Persians head-on. The decision was made. There would be no surrender. They would stand and they would fight. But even as Athens prepared for war, they needed help. A desperate plea was sent to Sparta, the most feared warriors in all of Greece, and so a single man, Pheidippides, the fleet-footed messenger, was sent on an unthinkable journey. He ran nearly 240 kilometers from Athens to Sparta in a desperate bid for aid. When he arrived, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath, he delivered his plea.
Athens is in danger. The Persians are at our gates.
But the Spartans did not march. Their laws forbade them from going to war before the full moon. Pheidippides' mission had failed. The Athenians were on their own. The Athenian army marched to Marathon, their shields gleaming in the sun, their spears raised high. They saw the Persians, thousands upon thousands, waiting, prepared. But the Greeks did not turn back. They set up camp, knowing that in the morning death would come for them. For days, the two armies watched each other. The Persians, confident in their numbers, waited for the Athenians to surrender. The Athenians, knowing that retreat meant destruction, stood firm. But Miltiades had no intention of waiting. He had a plan, a brilliant, daring plan. He would not fight the Persians head-on. Instead, he would lure them in. He thinned the Greek center, strengthening his flanks, setting a deadly trap, and then the order was given. With a mighty war cry, the Athenians charged, not marched, charged. They sprinted across the battlefield, their shields raised, their spears gleaming. The Persians, stunned, let loose a volley of arrows, but the Greeks were too fast. Before another volley could be fired, the Athenians slammed into their ranks. The Battle of Marathon had begun. The sound of clashing shields, of screams, of metal on flesh filled the air. Persian warriors, fierce and well-trained, fought back, pushing against the Greek center. The Greek lines began to wilt, to bend. But then, the trap was sprung. The stronger Greek flanks suddenly surged forward, enveloping the Persian forces in a deadly embrace. The Persians, trapped and surrounded, fell by the thousands, their great army shattered. Those who could fled, running for their ships, leaping into the water, desperate to escape. When the dust settled, 6,400 Persians lay dead. The Athenians, they had lost only 192. Athens had won. They had done the impossible. They had defeated the mightiest empire on earth. And with that victory came hope. But the people of Athens did not know. They waited, terrified, for news, and so Pheidippides ran again, this time not to Sparta, this time to Athens. He ran for miles, his legs burned, his lungs screamed, but he did not stop. He knew what was at stake. When he reached Athens, his vision blurred, his strength failing. He stood before the people and, with his last breath, he shouted, "We have won!" And then he collapsed, dead. But his name, his run, his sacrifice was never forgotten. Over 2,000 years later, the story of Pheidippides would inspire the creation of the marathon race, one of the most grueling and celebrated events in the Olympic Games. But the war was not over. Darius's son, Xerxes, would return, bringing an army even greater than before. But what Marathon had proven was that the Greeks would not bow. They would stand, they would fight, and they would defy the greatest empire the world had ever known. The echoes of Marathon still resonate today, in every marathon run, in every fight for freedom, in every stand against tyranny. History is shaped by those who dare to defy the impossible. What will you stand for?